Welcome to the Yoga Voice, a podcast by City Yoga, School of Yoga and Health. Our guests discuss how the contemporary practice of this ancient art transforms the lives of individuals and communities in the Midwest and beyond. City Yoga has been a center for the practice of yoga and yoga teacher training since opening in 2002. Join us as we explore how yoga inspires and transforms.
Once again, Dave Sims here at the Yoga Voice, and today we've got, for his second time at our show, Taylor Hunt, Ashtanga yogi from Columbus, Ohio, and we had this great conversation. He's here at the studio doing a weekend intensive, so a series of workshops have been awesome, and so we took advantage of the time here to get him on the show again. So I'm excited about that, and he's such a gracious guy to hop on, take time out of the busy teaching schedule to talk to us and bring a voice to the listeners out there. And we talked about the evolution of his practice and growing as an individual. If you think back to when he was on the show earlier, not that long ago, he talked about how last year was a very transformative year for him, and personally and in a lot of different ways. And since then, he had gone to Mysore for about a month, which is a little shorter. He usually goes longer than that. And he went to study with his teacher. And he talked about how that was one of the most transformative trips he's ever made there, and how some changes there just had a really positive impact on him. And I'll let you hear that in a moment. He also talked about his podcast, The Heartbreak Kids. So if you haven't listened to that, it's a great podcast where he has conversations with amazing people in the yoga community. And of course, we touched on his nonprofit and some of the events and exciting things he has coming up as well. But it was really just a nice time to reconnect and have a nice one-on-one conversation with Taylor Hunt. So do enjoy. Welcome back, Taylor Hunt. It's great to have you at the studio again. So welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So it's awesome to have you here in town doing the weekend of Ashtanga. And, it's just bringing this great energy to the studio. So we totally appreciate that.
Yeah, you guys got a lot of really cool things happening here and good vibes, and good to see people that I've, basically worked with several times now. I get to see them again and see how their practice has progressed. It's really cool.
Yeah, definitely. It's fun to watch the community evolve and have that. It was almost like a little reunion this morning when there's a couple of people that came from outerlying areas that I hadn't seen in a while.
Yeah, so. I mean, I haven't seen them for a while either. But it is nice. Like events like what we're having here this weekend give us an opportunity to have, a deeper sense of community, like with people that might practice at home, and give them an opportunity to come back to the studio, and also getting the new people kind of excited for, the things that they're learning, or being in a Mysore class for the first time, or any of that kind of stuff, I think is really important.
Yeah, so. Definitely. The one thing I was thinking about, one thing I like to ask people to kind of kick off our podcast.
Sure, let's kick it.
Is what is really inspiring you about yoga today?
Whoa. What's inspiring me about yoga? Right now I think it's actually the hard conversations that are being had. And also that people are sort of going into a place of questioning, what yoga can do for them, even with a sense that not everyone is healthy in the yoga community. Mm-hmm. And so these tough dialogues are actually quite inspiring, because coming from a recovery perspective, I know that when you talk about and you bring light to things that are very difficult to speak about, and you bring light to them, then it makes people reevaluate and also change behavior as a result of it. And so it's really inspiring to see people have difficult conversations and and watching, that kind of unfold. And, that's happened from my teacher to some senior students to myself to some of the podcasts that I've done. We've had really difficult conversations about some things that just are not okay, and that it's inspiring for it to happen, because when you keep things behind closed doors and, you're only as sick as your secrets, like they say, you start realizing that, this is a really powerful time. Where, if you're, halfway into yoga and not that into it, it's really easy for you to disappear, because no one wants to evaluate it. But when you do evaluate it, you can get a greater sense of peace and understanding of why you're actually doing it, and, the things that motivate you to show up at your mat on a continual basis.
Yeah.
And that's empowering to me, because it means that we're headed towards health, like everyone's like, oh, it's so bad, so many controversies and so many things. And it's, and not that we need to address all of them, but, or in this podcast, but just the fact that that's being acknowledged means that we're actually headed towards health. And that's an amazing thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a really amazing thing.
Yeah. Well, and it reminds me of sort of that recovery principle of uncover, discover, and discard, you know, like you can,
that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. Same exact thing.
Yeah.
And that's why it's really inspiring to me, because, people are like, oh, it's so bad. Like, everyone in yoga is so messed up and whatever. I've heard a massive amount of things. And, but from my experience, when this stuff gets brought up and it's addressed properly, then like all of a sudden, like I'm inspired because it's headed towards health. It's not headed towards more sickness, you know, or, more ego or whatever, you know? So, yeah.
Well, and for our listeners out there that might not be familiar with, Taylor has a podcast called Heartbreak Kids.
Yep. And
it's been going for a while. And does it go out? How often does it?
Yeah, it goes out every other week. And, the primary focus is like why we practice yoga, and also like talking about difficult things like life circumstances or people's stories. I started off doing podcasts with my students, and there was a huge outpouring of support for like people, like they had an opportunity to share their story where they might not have ever, had the experience like me in 12 steps where you can get in front of a podium and like share your story.
Right.
These people had an opportunity to share it. And then, we're about to enter season 3, but the second season, like I started inviting like what I would say more senior teachers, people who are my friends, and I've got to hear about their hard stories, which you never hear about, people like that struggling. And so, it's been really kind of powerful. And so, season 3 is about to kick off. Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Yeah. So, I'll check that out, and we'll put some details on that in our, podcast notes, so look for that. Well, last night you led a great session here on Yoga Sutras, and you touched a little bit on a recent trip to India.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious for you to, if you want to elaborate and talk about that experience and your prior, how that's all evolved. I know you've been doing that for a while.
Well, it's sort of, it was very enlightening trip. Because Ashtangis just don't like change, and there's been a lot of like what I was talking about. There's been a lot of controversy. There's been sort of the breakup of somewhat of the Joyce family, like as they try and figure out like how to move forward, like through difficult times. And so, Shrat opened up his own center, and for the longest time, the Shala was Pattabhi Joyce's house, which his mother took over after his after Pattabhi Joyce's death. Shrat's mother took it over, and Shrat lived there for a long time. But he bought his own house, and eventually then he moved into another neighborhood. And there's been sort of like they still have a relationship, but there is sort of like this breaking between like Saraswati and Shrat, which is at first everyone in the Ashtanga community was like I don't think this is good. Like, we've spent all of this tapas and this discipline, like, in this one space. Like, I don't want to go to another space, you know, and that's kind of the Ashtangi way. It's like, we all want to go to our one spot in our shala. Like, our mat is always in that one spot. And it's like, well, you know, the nature of life is things change. And so, you know, so there was a lot of like skepticism. And then, you know, I also heard a lot about people kind of throwing it under the bus that there was some sort of like more of a corporate feel that was going on with Ashtanga yoga. And I don't think that there could be anything further from the truth. You know, so I went there a little bit of a skeptic because I am one of these Ashtanga people. You know, I make fun of them, but I'm also making fun of myself, you know, because that's, you know, it's like, there are a lot of people like myself that are like, you know, like, we don't want to change. We want the same thing. Like, we want to be in the same spot, you know, all that kind of stuff. We do the same practice every day. It's like, you know, there's just some things that are very like, you know, habitual that we do. And so I went there as a skeptic. And when I arrived, you know, I had to figure out how to get there, and, you know, I had to take a longer scooter ride where most of the time you just walked. Like, my house that I have there year round is literally 5 minutes away from the old shala. And so it was just a lot of change in the beginning. And I went there as a skeptic, and I was kind of sad, to be honest with you. I mean, I was like, I don't know if I want to go back, you know, because I felt like I entered that room one person, and through my trips, I exited as a different person, which was really powerful for me personally. And so I went to the first day at the shala, and what I realized is that, you know, there was sort of a piece there that was never present before. And because there was so much density and so much intensity, because the room was very small. Like, we fit 77 people in it. And to be honest, there should have probably only been 60 people there, you know, but we fit 77 people. And, you know, so you go to this new space, and it's sort of like a warehouse and airplane hangar, kind of put together. It's a big place, but the way that he set it up is that there's like 70 spots, you know, and everyone has like sort of an assigned spot, and, which is good for Ashtangis, but, you know, also, like, we're not kicking the people next to us, you know, we're able to stay more focused. There's more breath. You know, I remember times at the old shala where there was sort of like condensation. There was like a climate or weather storm in the shala, because there was so much heat, so many people, 400 people going through the place, that it would just start, you know, you'd be doing like ekam, putting your hands above your head and getting hit with like water dripping down on your forehead or, you know, on shoulder or something like that. And so there was much more space. And what I realized just after the first practice is that it needed to happen. And the reason why it needed to happen is because it was time for things to be acknowledged, and that there to be some sort of breakaway. And I felt sort of honored to be there, because, you know, I want to support my teacher, like, through a difficult time. You know, he's had people that have stopped practicing. He's had authorized teachers that don't want to be authorized anymore. There's certified teachers that have been taken off a list, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And so it's been a couple years of kind of turmoil. And he's been kind of leading us through it. But I mean, I did my practice, and it was literally one of the most, it was still intense, but it felt spacious. It felt like abundance. And that's like not what I ever experienced in Mysore before. And it felt good. Yeah. Like, it felt like that space was actually needed. And people were able to, you know, not worry about someone kicking them and things like that. And it was just, I mean, it was really kind of mind blowing to me. Yeah. And there was such like this, you know, powerful experience that you realize that the practice can be much softer. And I saw philosophical changes that were really powerful for me. You know, it's like, you know, we're not held to the same standards as what we used to be. Like, there's not some, you know, a lot of people will call Ashtanga yoga rigid, and that wasn't present there anymore. You know, and so it was a breath of fresh air. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better trip. It was probably my first or the best trip that I've ever had there. Yeah, even though that went through a bunch of change.
Yeah. Well, I think you mentioned last night, like it seemed to be softening.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And something you mentioned too reminded me of that transition from sort of break from the old teacher to the new sort of lineage holder.
Right.
And also that with past controversy, trying to separate the teachings from the teacher.
Yeah.
And
that's what it felt like.
Is that a nice separation?
Yeah. I mean, there's never going to be a full separation, I don't think, because like they're from the same bloodline. And, it's like, you can still love someone, but also not support the behaviors that they, like showed you or whatever. And I think that there's still love there because of like what was taught. And, I also think that C-RYT didn't experience that. Like, he was 8 years old, like when a lot of the things kind of came out where it's like, Pattabhi Jois was doing some things that he shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
So,
well, I sort of feel like a little enheartened that there's this change, like a little shift, and that I think when you were talking about C-RYT a few years ago, like there was little things he was doing different with the practice, and I don't know. Last night I was kind of thinking like this is a natural progression. Like if yoga continues to evolve, for the cultural needs of the times,
right?
And if you think about what it looked like to practice Ashtanga in the 70s, even from like Pattabhi Jois, it was much different than in the 90s. And then for me, not having been there and experienced it, but listening to some of these kind of older Ashtangis that have been doing it for 40 years, and they're like, there was these 5-day or multiple day intensives, and the whole progression of that was much different, and at its core it's the same practice, but it's executed differently.
There's a certain evolving and sort of softening that is happening. But the other thing that was really remarkable to me is that the people that were there, for the and not that I'm bad mouthing Ashtangis, but like we want what we want. It's like we want the adjustments, like we're type A. There's a certain ambition that goes along with it. Like we've all heard these things, like that's and I'm one of these, but the cool thing is that there was the people there were just genuinely more nice. They were. And I don't know if it was because of like C-RYT's like philosophy that, was kind of shifting or whatever, but I do know that everyone that I came in contact with was not from some pretentious club. There was not this fundamentalism thing that sometimes happens to people in Ashtanga. Like this is the right way and the only way. It's like, and that's a real turnoff to me. It's always been a turnoff. I do believe that Ashtanga yoga is like the best form of yoga that you can do, but I don't have to go around and say everyone else is like doing the wrong thing while, like me giving my opinion that, it's changed my life and, I think it's the best. I don't have to put everyone else down, and I'm not that kind of person or teacher or any of that stuff. Like it's just not worth it to me. And, that's just ignorant as far as I'm concerned. And so there wasn't that type of person there, so the people that were showing up there were genuinely like big hearts, open minds, open hearts. Like, I mean, it was just like, a breath of fresh air, in all aspects. Like we weren't fighting each other to get into those 77 spots or whatever. Like we were, like people were just going in and doing their practice. There was less anxiety. There was less like ambition or aggressiveness and all that stuff. And, and these are sort of some of the things that, scared people away from going to Mysore. It's like, because those type of people, and it's like the whole thing is softened, Dave. It's really amazing. Yeah. And it's softened at my shala as well, too, just because of my experience there.
Well, I could sense a difference in the way you were teaching in Mysore this morning.
Yeah.
There's a Mysore session. I mean, it's probably been a year and a half since you've been here, so I haven't made it over to Columbus, and but I could see that, and I don't know if like it was softening is the right word, but your energy felt intense and focused, but in a calmer way.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I think I'm getting old. I mean, I am getting older. I'm not thinking that I'm getting older.
You're over 40 now.
No, not yet. I'm 38. I'll be 39 in April 24th.
I knew you were getting close.
I'm getting close. Don't offend me that way. But yeah, I mean, there's been a softening. One of the major shifts that happened besides that trip is I went to China and no one spoke English. Like 0 people spoke English over there. Okay. And this was last year. And the cool thing about it is what I realized is that you could be focused and not talk and not like give intensity from like a speaking standpoint. It could be through body language and stuff. And, you know, and that really changed my teaching because I had a translator the first day in Mysore class and I was like, and I asked her to leave after the first day. I was like, you don't need to do it anymore. It's my job to figure out how to teach these people regardless of words. And that really shifted I don't talk as much. I mean, I still give some pointed feedback and I'm still pretty straight. I am straightforward, like with my teaching, but it's calmer and it like, it feels better to me, but it's evolving for me as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. And your community at Ashtanga Yoga Columbus, that's been 6 years.
Yeah. So we entered our 6th year this year. We'll have then completion of 6th year will be at the end of this year. Yeah. So yeah, we had our 5-year anniversary and we're headed towards 6. Yeah.
Oh, that's really awesome. You've done incredible things with the community and and you've been busy with other things. I know, family and kids, 3 kids.
3
now.
kids. Yeah. I mean, it's, the Ashtanga Yoga Columbus has a strong following. It might be the most popular yoga studio in Columbus. I'm not 100% sure of it, but I know that it's attended regularly, by a lot of the students. I mean, like they're not just showing up one day a week. They're like committed practitioners of Ashtanga Yoga. And that's really, an honor to get to be a part of that journey with them.
Yeah.
So.
Are you seeing a lot of other studios beyond Ashtanga studios popping up in Columbus? I mean, we're seeing a pretty big emergence of new studios in Indy. I don't know how Columbus is compared.
I mean, for me, I don't really pay attention to it. And the reason why I don't pay attention to it is because I'm going to get who I'm supposed to get,
right.
And not everyone's going to, I do believe Ashtanga Yoga can really fit to everybody. But I know that it's not really for everybody, like it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. Like not everyone wants to do that. And so I'm going to get who I'm going to get. And, and because we have like a niche, I think what is important is that there's no Taylor Hunt at the other studio that's doing what I'm doing. And it's like, if I continue to be authentic and honest and like put my message out there, like people will come. And so there's studios happening, but they're mixed discipline yoga studios, and I'm not what we're doing is completely different than what they're doing. We're not even on the same. It's not even the same sporting arena. It's like it's a completely different thing. There's no other Mysore program. Like what we have, or traditional studio that just has one style of yoga. Yeah. Yeah. So,
well, I guess my point was more about the more studios there are of yoga in general, the more people will be encouraged to try yoga.
Yeah.
And people tend to go to find a deal maybe, or someplace convenient to where they live. And the idea is that creates a bigger awareness about yoga. Yeah. And then people that, like when you went to your first class, it happened to be Ashtanga, but you wouldn't have known that from anything else.
Right.
So there's a larger group of people like that. Yeah. That potentially could wander into your studio and not know anything else. So I'm encouraged by the growth in the Midwest.
Yeah, it's definitely growing for sure. Yeah. But the other thing that you reminded me of is that the reason why like I kind of answered it the way that I was is because what I've found is that millennials, they're different than how like my generation is, and they do a massive amount of research before they actually come into whatever space. And, they know about the different styles before they show up because they've done the research.
Okay. Good point. Yeah.
And so, if they're drawn to my message, they're coming to me. If they're drawn to another studio's message, they're coming to them. They're more informed than I was when I walked in just because of the culture today.
Yeah.
And that millennial, they're already checking out my Instagram page. They already saw the YouTube. They've already seen the Facebook. Actually, they might not even be on Facebook.
Right.
These other channels, and they're more informed. And so it's like my job and maybe also, as a studio owner, your job to just who are we?
Right.
What are we made of? Why are we different? What sets us apart? Why is there more experience? And so the exposure is great, for people that aren't paying attention. But really the cool thing is that if you continue to put your message out there, you're going to get who you get, especially the newer crowd. And we have a lot of young people,
Well, that kind of the point of our starting this podcast was to keep our relevance in the community, but also to get our message out about what City Yoga is about. And that's why we started with City Yoga teachers and people like yourself that come here and do workshops and weekend intensives and that. So and I'm glad you said that because it reminded me it's important to communicate with potential new students about what you are about. And that, that's good. It's good reminder. Yeah.
It's the most important thing that what I've found is that the more authentic I speak and the more authentic I am to what is important to me and sharing it on social media channels, the more that people are attracted to it. So your space, City Yoga, it's the more that you can just sort of dial into what you guys are about, the more powerful it can be.
Right.
It's I travel around and talk about my story and talk about the sutras and do these workshops and all that stuff. But it's the Columbus community is what I'm trying to affect. It's because I know that yoga can really, change their life, how it changed mine.
Yeah.
It's and so it's really powerful. The more that I just drop away the BS and just get to a place of, this is who I am, and it's if you like this, come check it out. If you don't like it, go find somewhere that you can find, where you find that something that speaks to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when it's that black and white, instead of trying to appease everyone, I'm just really trying to just be me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Give them resources, tell them what we're about, be me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been one of the best, social media growth things that have happened at my studio.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. The, your personality is behind the studio.
Sure.
Right. So that's important for people that are, studio owners, saying this to myself as well, is knowing what your community's about.
Yeah.
And,
who's showing up to your classes
exactly
already. Yeah.
That's a key thing.
Yeah.
I want to circle a little bit back to coming back from India.
Yeah.
Because I was just thinking, this was kind of a spur of the moment podcast for our listeners. I think last night, I'm hey, Taylor, let's do a podcast tomorrow. It's sure. And, last time he was on the show, he talked about, which was a few months ago, but how last year had been a really kind of transformative year of travel. And you talked about going to Israel with your wife.
Totally.
And then since then, you went and had this transformative month in Mysore and a shorter trip than you usually take there.
Yeah.
How has that, and I know you haven't been back very long, so it's not really a fair question, but I'll ask it anyway. How has that affected how you're showing up? Just I think you're still processing some of that. But
sure, I am totally. It's just, like I said, it's softened me,
mm-hmm.
Last year was deeply traumatic year, but with the, traumatic things that were kind of going on in my life and the intensity of the work schedule that I put on myself, It also became transformative as well. Transformation is very rarely an easy process. Like rebirth is, like showing up differently than how you do before is definitely a difficult thing to do. But, I'm still processing it, but I think the major takeaways is that my heart feels open, and it's like my eyes feel open, my mind feels open. I'm doing good with my sobriety, like I've got to spend a massive amount of time with my wife, and, I love her to death. And, it's like we just are stretched to the max because of, 3 kids and all that stuff. And I just feel like more centered and grounded in myself. And maybe that's what you felt in the room today. But I do know that, I feel really, if I'm on planes all the time, like literally, I mean, I have way too many million-mile, credits. Like it's ridiculous. I'm about halfway to 1 million. And, when you travel that much and, there's the taxing of your body and the practice, like you start to like evaluate like whether or not that you should be doing this and like what your motives are. And I remember like my wife saying to me, and this is like right after Israel, she said something to me. She's like, why do you do all these workshops? And I was like, well, it pays for my family and, like I get an opportunity to go teach other communities. And she's like, if those are your motives, like you're in a really bad place. And I was like, damn, did she just say that? And it was a little bit deeper of a conversation than that.
Yeah.
But I mean, the moral of the story is like, I get a chance to serve people. Like the workshops are not about me. Like my teaching at AYC is like it's selfless, because I'm able to show up and like try and give people what I think that they need to get to the next step. And that's a good place to be. It's like, this thing is not about going to a workshop and making money. That's just like part of the reward. But that's not the motive behind it. If you, and so you sit on these planes all the time and, you're sitting in first class and you're like, oh yeah, Taylor, you're doing an amazing job. You're so good at this. Like, look how cool this is. But, it's like, that's the wrong motive, And so showing up at a space and being grateful to be there and like honoring like the person that is hosting you and, and really trying to teach from a very authentic place where, there's no BS. Like I'm not putting my personal stuff on other people. I'm just like trying to be as clear as I possibly can. And that's what all of that transition gave to me. Like, from last year to going to Mysore to going to Israel, like I had amazing experiences. And so getting to that place where you really feel settled inside, because my whole life I haven't felt settled inside, but right now I feel like the most settled that maybe I've ever been in my entire life.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and I think like as a fellow studio owner, and you're offering a spiritual practice in a sacred space, if you will, or a safe space, a place where people can have their own experience of transformation that you help facilitate. I think it can be it's like a delicate dance, because you have to, rent's not free and utilities there's changing economies with like operating a building. And, but at its core, and I often think about the early AA message of like, Bill Wilson was a salesman, the founder of AA, for those that aren't aware. And he was a former stockbroker, and he was going to the Rockefellers in the 30s and 40s, like, we need money, and he's going to publish a book and become a millionaire. And basically, Rockefeller said, I think the best thing for AA is for it to stay broke.
Yeah.
So there was always been this little weirdness about, not amassing funds, at the group level or at the regional or national level. So not comparing a yoga studio to that stay broke mentality, but the idea of cautiously balancing profitability with accessible service that you're offering. So if you're offering this for people to come in, and I know you do this kind of a segue into the charitable stuff you're doing, where I think it's, for me, it's really been important to give back.
Totally.
And
same.
That, and that's why, because I believe there's like something intangible about what that invisible energy, or the intangibles of a yoga practice. And when you can give that to people, particularly with the Ashtanga method, that's been a powerful driving force in your life for, well over a decade. When I would hear about, listen to your podcast, and, I try to keep up with social media. I'm not that great at it, but because for me, it can be a time suck.
Yeah, for sure it can be. But the other thing I was thinking about too, and I understand like what you're talking about with the, profitability and like keeping the place open and sustaining like all of it. But for me, like this is just about me. There's just a certain spot where like fear and faith come in, and it's like, which one do you want? It's like, do you want your life to be run by fear that you're not going to make your bills paid? Or do you want to have like, a life that is full of faith? And do you believe that, that you can be taken care of, and I do believe today. And there was a time where, in the, not so distant past, that it was like, I'm not sure if we're going to make it, through like these difficult times. And today, like I choose faith. Like, like I'm trying to live as much into grace as I possibly can. And if anything, like the softening that I've experienced is really about that. It's more about God today than it's ever been. Like I really want to be a clear vessel that I can, not pull any punches and really just like do what I'm supposed to do to fulfill like what my dharma is. Yeah. And it's like, you're going to live in fear or you're going to live in faith. And it's like, which one? Choose one, because you can't operate in both at the same time. And that's sort of what AA teaches us and all this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And again, but we still have like bills and studio and like teacher, cost and electric bills, which is ridiculous, and all that stuff. But, we have 5 years of proven that 5 years that we've proven that we've been able to do it every single month, and I look at all the negatives instead of looking at like the past 5 years of like, look at what I've already been through. Right. Like now all of a sudden it's going to change. I'm not going to make this happen anymore. Like, and that's lack of faith on my part. And that's like what that's what's inside of me right now. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and you're talking a little bit about the expansion of the Trini Foundation. Sure. And what else you got going on there?
Yeah. I mean, the Trini Foundation is doing awesome. I mean, we need donors. We need people that, can donate money or time or any of that stuff. We really need as much support as we possibly can, because our programming has really expanded. I'm not sure the exact numbers of all of the programming, but I do know that it's up significantly. And, we have a bunch of scholarships that we're having like all over the United States and some in Europe as well. And, the other cool thing is like, we're teaching more classes. We've taught more people. Like, we have 50 partner studios, so there's a lot of weight on the Trini Foundation. And really like our biggest challenge is that we're trying to raise money, and like there's a certain altruistic thing that we're asking from people to, to give money or to give time, like to be part of the volunteers, to host classes, like, people like yourself, like hosting a donation class and, doing those around the country and really mobilizing like sort of a grassroots effort, to sort of tackle the, the problem of addiction, so people don't have to suffer, like give them these mindfulness, breath with movement, connection, so that they can be different people or have more tools in their tool belt to, to actually, get over that craving or, to get into deeper sobriety or ask more out of their sobriety, stuff like that. And that's been really powerful work. I mean, we have a new website, we have, a new board that we basically voted on not too long ago. We're doing more social media stuff. Like one of the biggest things that we're asking for people that are donors is to just do a Facebook fundraiser for us, and so like when your birthday comes along, like all we're asking is like on social media to set the limit for $200 or $400 or $500 or whatever, and post it, send it to your friends and post it on your feed and all of that stuff. Because last year we raised a bunch of money just off of Facebook.
Okay.
It's like, and that's one thing we actually just sent out an email not too long ago that was just like, it cost you nothing, but you put it out there, you try and raise $500 for us, and it's been very successful for us. So it's a new age of fundraising.
Right.
It's done through social media, not as many emails kind of thing. And we're asking people to be heroes, like to pay for someone's scholarship. So that they can go to yoga for 3 months, or we're asking a teacher to teach a class for us, donate that time, raise money, to help us with those kind of things. Yeah. And our program is getting bigger. So it's like, more demands that are being put on the charity.
Yeah. So that, for just elaborate a little bit on the scholarship you mentioned, students can apply and they can get into a Ashtanga program at a partner studio. And Trini Foundation pays for them to go there, as well as they pay to send teachers into treatment centers or juvenile facilities, or what all are you going
both.
into?
I mean, there's treatment centers. At one point, we had like a prison or halfway house that we were doing. We pay the teachers to go into all of these facilities because we don't want them to give up the commitment. I think there's other organizations that are doing stuff that are similar to us, but they ask for volunteers to go teach in these facilities. We don't want volunteers that are teachers. We want volunteers that can help with our staff or administrative things, and put them to work there. We want the teachers to be teachers, so we pay them for it. Like we pay every single teacher. And so that's a really like powerful thing. It's a statement for how important teachers are. There's as important as sponsors for people who are in recovery,
right?
As far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Very good point. Well, that we did a little, or I did a little work on a exhibit at our Indiana State Museum, and it's a lot of community partners worked with the team over there to create this exhibit called The Fix, to build awareness around the opioid and addiction crisis that we've been in for several years. And I finally got to go over and see it just the other day, and it's really amazing how they've come together. And we're going to get some of the Trini Foundation pamphlets over there, because it's set up to build. They have student groups, and typical museum crowd comes through there, and it's this really interactive, I think it's 7,000 square foot exhibit. So it's pretty big. And it talks about ways to combat stigma. And they have interactive sort of video. You can it'll ask you questions, and so it helps people develop sensitivity and having conversations if they're not familiar with the addiction and different aspects of it. And then there's a lot of several little kiosks where people will tell their story. There's some like a meditation mindfulness table that's interactive, where you can sit there and breathe and see the effects on the brain. And there's a little yoga display, which was kind of where we came in. Nikki and I went out there, and they filmed Nikki, who's the founder of City Yoga, and the Yoga 12-Step Recovery Program. So she, posed in a series of poses that, people can come and kind of experience a little bit of yoga. There's also the original manuscript of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous that's on loan as a part of that display. So there's just like a whole bunch of resources that have come together. And
that's what we need in order to combat this. Yeah. It's like we need an effort of the entire community to bring awareness to it. And that's what the Trini Foundation, that sounds like what the Fix is trying to do. Well. Start the dialogue, acknowledge that things are actually happening, bring awareness to it, show people different tools, and, so that we can overcome it.
Yeah. Very good. So on the, I'll put Trini Foundation in our podcast, details so people can find ways to access. We'll put the website and along with Ashtanga Yoga Columbus. And so you had pretty big travel schedule this year still, right?
Yeah.
You're here all weekend. So, of course, this podcast will air after that's over.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to, experience the rest of the sessions that you got going on here.
Yeah.
What's, say, like summer of 2020 looking like? Any place you're going that you want to shout out to?
I mean, cool. A couple cool things that I got going on is like I'm going to Warsaw, which is like will be a huge event there. I'm also going to Finland again, which I'm really excited about. But the things I'm most excited about is really our practice weeks that we have at Ashtanga Yoga Columbus. We basically for 5 days, like people from all over the country come in and they get to practice for 5 days, Mysore style and a lead class. And the first one that we're doing in June is actually, it's for the primary series. So someone who wants to deepen their understanding of the primary series. I'm really excited about that because they're always like great events. And then the next thing is, that in the winter, which is like the first or second week of, December, as you approach Christmas, we're actually going to have a second series, and we're also going to do a little bit of a third series, like poses, breakdown and stuff. And for some people, that might seem really intimidating, but I have a lot of students that are working at that space, and those are two things that I think are just really exciting for people because you can come be in community, you gather, you can talk, we can talk about your personal things that are happening in your practice, how to stay motivated, injuries, really break down like every single aspect of the practice. And those are what I'm the most excited about. One, because they're at my studio, but the second thing is really that, it's, they're usually great events and I'm home, and so I want to do more of those things. Yeah. It's only a 10-minute commute. Yeah.
Well, and, on that note too, I would encourage people, like if you have, just barely dabbling into the second series, like go to these things. I know we were talking about earlier, I shared, we have students that are kind of new to Ashtanga and they were like intimidated, like, I don't think I'm ready to go to a Taylor workshop. I'm like, yeah, you are. He's going to meet you where you're at. So, I want to put that shout out to, all the listeners out there. If you've got, access to visit Taylor, if he's coming through your community, that, level of experience is not a prerequisite. No,
actually in Mysore style, it's like, we're teaching all levels and really the beginner is the most important person in the room, and a lot of times we just think about it the opposite. Like the advanced person is going to get a bunch of adjustments, but like why do you have to give a bunch of attention to someone who already knows what they're doing? It's like, like you're helping them on aspects, but it's for the beginner. And so, I meet people wherever they're at. And I think a lot of Ashtanga people do. Yeah. So just not talked about a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good. I'm glad you mentioned that. I know you got to teach another session here pretty soon. Is there anything you want to add in or any topic you'd like to touch on before we wrap up?
The biggest thing is like, this next year, what I'm really trying to do is build recovery resources for people, because I think that there's a real lack of recovery resources. There's some people that are not interested in going to 12-step meetings, like they're not into it at all. And so like building, some recovery network of things that people can do, to help aid their journey, into sobriety. And that's going to be my focus and also raising money for the Trini Foundation because it's really a passion of mine. It's like, I don't get paid from any of the Trini Foundation stuff. Like it's all volunteer for me. There's employees of it, but I don't get paid any of that, of the money. And I think that's important to note. Like I'm just doing it because like, this is how I give back. And so just supporting those two aspects, because I think that's, I just read a news article where they were talking about, that they're going to have a mobile morgue. I've heard this before, but like in Franklin County, they're going to have a mobile morgue because the amount of deaths because of fentanyl and heroin and stuff. And like I want to be a part of the solution, and maybe I'm a good sponsor, maybe I'm not a good sponsor, but I'm able to like give back in a different way than I feel like what other people are. Yeah. And it's just my passion, Like I want to reach that person so they don't have to go through the struggle that I went through.
Right.
Yeah. And that's where my focus is going to be. And so maybe a book or online recovery course or, things like that can really support people to get into, that. I mean, I'm also going to do a beginner's course online, because I think that that's a huge, market, for people who don't want to show up in my studio. Like they can really have like a resource, even if they were an addict, they could join it or whatever, and they could do it in the privacy of their home because people are nervous about coming to the studio. Mm-hmm. And so my focus is a little bit that, this year to get those things done. And so that they're out there, not that anyone will buy them or, listen to them or whatever, but I think they're important just to do, and I'll leave the rest up to God.
Yeah. Just put it out there. And that's, I've had a similar philosophy of just like trusting the process, and the studio was a little bit like when I took it over, I'd think of like Field of Dreams, like you build it and they will come, and it's sort of the show up, do your best, and trust God or the universe or whatever higher being or power you believe in will sort out the outcomes in a positive way for all. And anyway, well, it's been super cool talking to you here.
Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah. And for those listeners, thank you for tuning in. We'll have details in our notes on a lot of the things that Taylor touched on, ways to see what he's up to. Of course, you can follow him on social media and you can find him on your own pretty easy, but we'll definitely have that available to you. And until next time, just be well and take care. Well, I do hope you enjoyed that conversation with Taylor Hunt. It's always a delight to have him here and just to talk to him and listen to his perspective on things. And wow, we touched a lot of topics. And if you want to learn more about Taylor, you can find in the podcast notes website for his studio, for his nonprofit. There, of course, you can find him on Facebook and Instagram. YouTube. He's very, very much has a large presence in social media. And if you go to his website, you can see his schedule and some of the workshops and practice weeks and things he talked about in the podcast. You'll be able to find there as well. So do check out the notes. And if you feel so inclined, you can rate us or give us a little comment. You can email us if you have suggestions on what you'd like to, guests you'd like us to have on the show and topics you want us to explore. So do enjoy the listen and give us some feedback. We're always welcome for that. And I thank you so much for your support and keeping this podcast going by listening to it and sharing it with your friends and family. And hopefully it makes your day a little brighter. Until next time, have an awesome day.
Thank you for listening to The Yoga Voice, brought to you by City Yoga, School of Yoga and Health, where we are committed to exploring how yoga inspires and transforms. Find out more at www.cityyoga.biz. That's CITYOGA.biz. Special thanks to our producer, Brian Sims, for his audio expertise.